The August 6th Planning Commission meeting to order. Petrea, would you do the roll, please? Here.
Mr. Iwan.
Larry?
He's
Here.
here. Mr. Babbitt. He's here.
Jean?
Jane.
Say here.
Probably can't hear you.
Oh, I can hear you. If Gene here.
Jane. Mr. Conley. Miss Devine.
Here.
Miss Schmersel.
I'm here.
And Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Okay, first order of business is the approval of the minutes for July 2nd. I know there had been some changes submitted. Are there any other changes that were not submitted to Petrea? Can I have a motion?
I move to accept.
Talking to your mic. Because when they do the tape, they need to hear what you
Yeah,
say.
I move to accept with changes that, you said there were changes? Yeah.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, public comments on agenda items. Do we have some public comments? Mr. Kumar.
Mark Primar, 81 Dungannon Hall. I have comments to offer about each of the tabs that are listed on the agenda, both under old business and new business, and I actually have a handout for all of you to follow. Ideally, it would be nice if during those discussions of each of the tabs, had an opportunity to offer the comment as opposed to going through all of them right now.
That's fine. I
Is
think
that okay?
that would be
Okay.
more efficient for all
Thank you
of
very
us.
much. Thank you.
That's fine. Any other public comment?
My name's Ben Daly. I'm the owner of a company, Royal Indigo Construction. I've been building out on the island for the last 25 years, and just thought I'd come and maybe try to offer a little bit more insight and information about the padel courts, and that's on the agenda, I think, for today. So if you want me to discuss that at that time, I'm happy to, or I can do it now.
Why don't you go ahead and I think, I understand you have a comment about the fencing heights.
A comment about a few things. So, you know, padel is very, I'd say, new to this country, and it's certainly something I see coming on the island. I believe the Sanctuary has a couple of courts coming on. Maybe they're doing a couple over Cacique as well. I have a client on a double oceanfront lot on Flyway that is considering moving away from the tennis court that's already been approved and moving into a padel court. So I have probably more knowledge than I would like to have about it, as I've been trying to learn myself. There are a couple of things I just want to let folks know about a padel court. There is an industry standard, or a standard height of the fencing that is 4 meters tall. Currently, I believe that the language has a 12-foot maximum height fence requirement. This padel court and any padel court that you would get from any of the major manufacturers is actually 1.2 feet taller than that. So as you're kind of modifying the language or in these ordinances, and forgive me, I'm not 100% sure exactly where this draft form is and exactly how far along those are, but if you're able to demonstrate that a tennis court or a paddle court would be acceptable, I would think that you would not want to prohibit that owner from being able to build one that is the dimensions that are an industry standard. They don't actually modify them or make them any smaller. The game is played off of the backboard, so they actually need to be at that particular height. So that is kind of one item I wanted to bring to your attention as you guys are adopting some new language. The second is the lighting requirements for tennis courts, or the non-allowance of lighting on sports courts in general. We've found that through the process of building tennis courts in the past, there's a recent tennis court that's been built on the island that does have lighting. We worked hand in hand with the different entities on the island to demonstrate that the lighting can't be seen by adjacent properties, by people on the beach, by people on the road, and it's actually insular to the property. We've been working with the ARB currently at our project over on Flyway to be able to demonstrate just that through dense vegetative screening at significant heights, multiple layers, to really make it an insulary item to the piece of property. So I'd like to, and I'm not sure if you guys are adopting new language or if you're just trying to take what the ARB has and kind of make that your own. But rather than having a no lighting policy, I would think that you're only looking at probably between 30 and 40 properties on the entire island that have enough lot space to allow for a court, and would think that it could be looked at on a case-by-case basis with regards to whether or not you're able to have A, the height of a paddle court, and B, the lighting that would be required to utilize it in the late afternoon and early evenings.
Okay, can I just ask a question
Yes,
about
ma'am.
Padel? Because some of you may have played it, I've never played. I was a big paddle tennis player, so I understand the higher thing, and they're even higher, I think. Is Padel, what kind of ball? Is it noisy like pickleball?
It's not. As a matter of fact, I have a packet that I put together for you guys. One of them has a video of it being played, so you know, because it's actually a lot less obtrusive as far as the sound goes than a pickleball court is. It doesn't have that kind of hollow sound
The
to it.
town council was discussing a noise ordinance yesterday, and noise is a factor for neighbors.
Yes, 100%. I would venture to say it's probably more quiet than tennis, but I have put a Dropbox link together. I was going to follow up with you. I talked to Larry Ewan just a little bit on the phone, just because I didn't understand this process. The ARB brought it to my attention, said, hey, you might want to just go down there and chat with everybody, because you might know something they don't, and be helpful in the process. So I'm happy to share that Dropbox link, and it has standard court sizes. It's got some imagery of courts that are well done in my estimation, and I've also put in there kind of the landscape architecture firm that we've been working with over at the project on Flyway. Has kind of demonstrated multiple heights and layers of vegetative screening with the actual court kind of situated both in elevation form and in plan view form, and that's what we've been working with ARB currently to kind of demonstrate that we can do just that. Nobody wants to put lights in their neighbor's eyes, and nor should they. I think that maybe there would be even an ordinance about what time they can be on and off. I don't know if you want to get that particular, but I do know that game is typically played in the late afternoons and early evenings or early mornings. It does have a glass element to the back of it. It does not allow for a lot of cross breezes to come into that court, so I think it would be more preferable for folks not to be playing in the heat of the day. It does require to be a lot more athletic, I would say, than pickleball. It's a pretty fun sport. My client's been kind enough to kind of bring me along on the journey to kind of learn how to play it a little bit. So anyhow, I will follow up probably with Mr. Ewan and just maybe send a link to him that he can share with you guys should you want any more of that information.
Okay, we appreciate your coming. The reason we're doing this was because we wanted to, there was an issue of, because there's so many other kinds of sport courts, we didn't want the regulation to be just tennis courts. So we'll discuss it. Lighting is an issue also, just for your understanding. It's not just the neighbors, it's the wildlife.
Sure,
So we're
yes.
very, very, outdoor lighting is generally something we
Absolutely.
don't like
Yep.
at night.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much
You're
for
very
your
welcome.
comments. We appreciate your help.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Any other public comments? Okay, moving on. Old business. Zoning text amendment AZ 025-00004, use regulations. John, you want to talk to us?
Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Our first item under the old business section is use regulations. This proposed ordinance you have seen and made recommendation on. It did receive first reading at last month's Town Council meeting. At that meeting, Town Council did discuss additional had conversation regarding the accessory uses section. And so within your materials, what's being highlighted is a couple of clarity statements based on town council's discussion. And following sort of those introductory items, what I'll do is run through what those changes are. Under, one second here, under page, the first is a discussion, this is shown on page 16 of 22 within the actual ordinance. One of the discussion points from town council was regarding under retail sales and retail or personal services, item 2, which discusses fuel stations. The language that reads today, it says fuel stations shall have no more than 4 fuel pumps servicing 8 fuel bays and shall be buffered and screened from any right-of-way with landscaping and architecturally integrated fencing approved by the planning director. The purpose of this particular change was to clarify the differences in fuel pumps and stations. So if you see fuel bays, so if you also see within this, I've added a clear definition that would go into our definition section 12-374. And town council also reduced that number from 6 to 4 total fuel pumps itself. So in layman's world, we would have the ability by right to do 8 cars at one time at a proposed location. Anything more than that would be required a special exception or variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. The additional clarity that's highlighted in this, if you flip one page over to page 19 of 22, based on our introductory public comments regarding private tennis courts and padel, pickleball, other sports courts, town council discussed one particular council member shared the interest of potentially just evaluating whether or not in a residential zoning district we would allow these types of private courts. Town council did not make any action on that, but just wanted the ability to broaden the definition of just private tennis courts. And so what you see added in the language is padel, pickleball, other similar sports courts. And that's just broadening the ability to add these same standards under that section of accessory structures in residential districts.
Excuse me, John, would that allow basketball courts too?
Basketball courts, by broadening this, I would imagine that falls into this, under this section of other sports courts. Yes.
So that's something we need to discuss.
Right, but if we want it to, I think we've got to get rid of the word similar, because similar to me implies that it's got to be either a paddle or a racket sport.
Yeah.
But that's just my thought.
It's there, other sports.
Or other sports.
I think it needs to be other. Yeah.
Unless we don't want, because basketball is much noisier.
No, I'm saying I don't think we do. So
Yeah,
I think
okay,
we would
so
want
that
to
was
change
my
similar to
question.
other.
Then that would broaden it further.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. I'm not saying tighten it, I'm saying make it broader, but perhaps that's not where we want to go. But I think similar probably doesn't do us any service there. I think we probably need to change that wording.
I don't disagree with that statement. I think the original language probably did not contemplate basketball courts because those are sometimes even just added to the driveway and not a standalone personal court. But I would agree broadening it to what would capture it all.
Do we want, but the question for discussion, do we want basketball courts?
Because
I
if you
think it would
don't,
be-
I would say take out everything and just leave it at private tennis, padel, or pickleball, and leave it at that. Or you could just say, or other racket sports.
My recommendation would be, I don't think that you would want to get into that level of detail of saying which sport would be amenable to a property owner, but if it all falls under essentially sports courts that has the same standards regarding distance requirements, buffering, et cetera, it would accomplish the mission.
So we probably need to decide what we're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to accomplish sports courts in general, or are we trying to accomplish paddle and racket sports?
The direction from town council was the former. That was the
Was
direction
paddle
from-
and racket,
From a broader sports course is what town council
but
recommended.
broader sports courts?
Yes.
Russ, do you have any, I mean, I'm thinking with noise and everything, what is your take on the town council? Do you think they wanted it broader for basketball and everything, or were they focused on racket sports?
I was the individual that John referenced about the noise.
Could somebody repeat what Russ was saying?
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Russ.
Here you go.
I was the individual that Mr. Taylor was referencing about bringing up the noise aspect of the sports. I can tell you, I think I'm the only one who has that concern, but we didn't get to a final vote, but I think I'm the only one. I did reference when I was there that I wouldn't want this next to me in my house. But then there was pushback saying, well, you can say the same thing about a pool. And I guess you could, but the thing that, so right now you allow tennis. I think I only know of one tennis court. I mean, I play pickleball. It's pretty darn noisy. I wouldn't want that next to me myself. And padel scares me because to me that's not designing with nature, because that's designing for a sports complex because you need to have a box, to play padel. But Mary Beth, to answer your question, the temperature I don't think is on my side, to be perfectly honest. I want to be transparent, but that's my viewpoint.
I would hate to see that someone couldn't have a basketball court in their driveway, but.
Well, but this
But we
is
wouldn't want a
building is
freestanding-
separate.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
is a separate
So,
accessory
I mean,
structure, so I don't think
Can
we want.
I do want to add one note regarding noise. So any noise, nuisance, or disturbance would be subject to our noise ordinance.
Yep.
So this isn't intended to address that impact of noise. That would be subject to the town's municipal noise ordinance.
I'd be comfortable, we have private tennis, padel, and pickleball courts, and just take out our other similar sports, and then if there's something we need to change it for down the road, if some new sport is invented, we can do that. But I don't want to have, my thought is I wouldn't want to have as of right, a field hockey or, little, I mean, I've seen a lot of these courts in other suburban areas where I think
Maybe
we
we
Similar
just-
is too broad.
Yeah.
So
Similar
with
is too
other-
So then we just say other paddle and racket sports?
Or just leave it at 10, because it
Paddle
was
or
just
racket.
tennis. Let's add padel and pickle, because those are real things on the island right now. If someone comes up with something else in the future, we can always amend it.
Variance, yeah.
And we can always amend. So I would say,
Just
What do you think, John?
Just as staff, just staff's perspective on this, you're going to narrow the window in the interpretation of the code. And so when we have an applicant come before us and the ordinance is silent, then we would have no way to kind of to engage with that particular property owner and their design. I think
But couldn't they go to BZA on that, John?
not if it's not an allowed use. So BZA is just a relief from what would be codified in the code. So
Would we be performing any harm by saying, or other paddle or racket sports there?
if
You're
someone
kind of,
wants to build a
the
racquetball
problem is you're
court.
kind of singling out certain sports though, because like this came up at the council meeting and like I was telling them, my neighborhood uses the word sports courts because it's broad. And
That's-
it,
yeah.
Like if somebody, my son, for example, plays ice hockey, the new thing for all the ice hockey kids is they get the
Yeah.
real slick like plastic
Oh, for sure,
area
that's
and
right.
it's loud as crud,
Yeah.
but someone in our neighborhood wanted to do that, someone wanted to do a pickleball court, and we ultimately just said no sports courts like within this distance to your neighbor's house to cover everything. Basketball court, like, is different. Like, there is a dedicated basketball court,
Right.
with a fence and where you've got two hoops and all. If you're just putting a driveway, I don't know that
Yeah.
would be a
So-
quote sports
so-
No,
court.
but I've seen basketball courts at the end of tennis courts. I've seen people do
Is
that.
there a downside to just saying sports courts?
I mean, you could say private tennis,
were.
padel, pickleball, or other similar, or you could say or other sports courts to call it, because I do think tennis, pickleball are probably the two most prevalent currently, but it just depends, because it's like if you're gonna, where I have some concern if you're singling out specific sports.
Okay, so we
Like,
say or other sports
And
courts.
by saying racket sports, you think that's still singling out? Because we're talking about a certain category of sports, which,
Because like hockey would still be loud, basketball would still be loud, like whatever. And I know noise is not, like, the noise ordinance covers that, but still you've got a massive white area with hockey goals set up or whatever it is. As a neighbor, you may not want to look
I'm
at
sorry,
that.
I'm just not I'm missing why, then, if we want to slightly broaden it, why racket sports is not okay.
I'm trying to understand the difference between basketball court and a tennis court.
On a basketball court, you can have 10 people out there playing and it's noisy. It's a whole different thing.
But also, it's like, aren't there different heights?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You've got different heights, you've got backboard.
So I agree with Sandy that what about other racket sports?
Pleasure of the commission, but staff would disagree. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
pleasure of the
because, I
commission.
mean, somebody could technically build like a, like faux ice hockey rink, like next to your house. Or they could build a full basketball court next to your house if that was the language employed.
Why don't we
But they
just-
couldn't do tennis, which it seems like that's sort of an arbitrary distinction.
So why don't we just say sports courts?
So wait,
Wait.
if our goal is not to be able to build a hockey court, how do we word it?
Then I would just say private tennis, padel, pickleball, or other sports courts. Just take out similar, because they're arguably similar suggests that it's racket sports.
But how is hockey not a sports court?
It is. That's what I'm saying. I would take out the words,
Fair.
all I'm saying is if the goal is to broaden this, to eliminate sort of any kind of,
It shall not be constructed, so they wouldn't be able to because it's a sports court.
Well, but
Yeah.
it says shall not be constructed within 20
20
feet
feet,
of an
yeah.
adjoining property.
They can still
So you
try.
could build a hockey rink within 20, at 21 feet.
So do we want to amend the language further and say shall not be constructed? Or do we want to give people a way to do
I
it?
also want to remind you that these as accessory structures, they still would have the sizing requirements for a property. So the size of those would be implicated by the impervious surface nature and would fall into lot coverage. So based on what I would think, one of the gentlemen spoke earlier, there's not a whole lot of properties with that amount of size that would be able to,
That could accommodate it.
that could accommodate.
Yep. You probably are dealing with a pretty small.
Yeah, but the point is,
Number.
if you live next door to one of those, you're
Oh,
going
it's
to
a
care.
bummer. Oh,
You're
for
gonna
sure.
care.
Impacted.
So how do, I guess the question is,
I'm missing why racket isn't acceptable, John. I don't think you finished your thought.
I was just trying to say, what's the difference between basketball and tennis? Like, I didn't understand the difference, and they both are sports courts. I don't understand the perspective of why.
Well, I think we just said there's height, there's more noise.
there's different uses.
We don't want it.
Fencing is still would be the same, because there's a fence height limit.
I guess right now, if I had lot coverage availability, could I put in a basketball court?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. That's what I'm just trying to understand, and I want to make sure. So this is something new that now people would be able to do, and it has ended up here because of the concern about, it seems to me, about noise that pickleball could create.
So
I
if
think
the
we-
concern is noise, the other opportunities I think of conditioning any of this based on time of use, those types of things would be in the purview of adding into the code to quote unquote tighten it down if that is a concern.
So John, maybe I missed this before. What you're saying is that today people could create a basketball court. This singles out higher standards or different standards for a smaller set of potential sports facilities that could be built.
No, what I shared earlier was that we typically see just a store purchase hoop that's placed at the end of the driveway. I don't think the
Yeah.
code accommodates or at least accounted for that within the technicalities of it being buffered away from screening those types of things.
That's kind of not
And
my
so-
question. The better example is this hockey example. So today, people could build their own hockey rink.
I've never permitted
No, but could they, if they had.
It'd have to be a full-size rink.
I think Russ's thought, like from the council meeting, was to eliminate like dedicated sports courts, whether that's a basketball court, whether that's a tennis court, whether that's a pickleball court, whether that's an ice hockey rink, anything. And so I think what I was trying to clarify is you could just say sports courts shall not be constructed within 20 feet of a neighboring property, because that was the idea, is nobody wants a big sports facility right next to their house.
So maybe one of the things we can do is, like, I'm just trying to get a mental of 20 feet from that wall to where is 20 feet? You know, is it to here?
But we've already got our setbacks, so.
You know, but maybe we want a sport court set back farther. I don't know, Robert,
I mean, 20 feet's not very far.
No.
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, you can't do a whole lot of buffering in 20 feet. I mean, you just, I mean,
Yeah.
you
What are
can't.
our setbacks from, I mean, they
So
can't put a court
maybe
in now.
maybe that would be the way to get at it, to protect the neighbors.
You could make any sports course apply to the standard building setbacks of that subject property.
Right.
Which in some cases, it would be 15 feet on the sides,
Yeah, I
20
don't
on
think
the
we want
rears.
to do that. We
So-
don't want a sport court going up to the setback line.
I said within the setback, the building footprint.
So you have another 20 feet or another 15 feet, you're saying? No?
Let me ask it a different way. If I can understand the direction, I can kind of give what I think might be options for solutions. I'm trying to better understand what are the concerns.
The concern is you're standing there and you're a porch and I
Noise.
have a court. If I'm within 20 feet of you, that's pretty close.
Well, right, so, but if we outline concerns, I think the concerns are noise and the visual. Both the visual from a neighbor's porch, potentially, or window, you wouldn't want to look out and you wouldn't want to see a sports court, right? We wouldn't want to hear a sports court. So the view from the road can be accomplished by landscaping, but the view from a neighbor can't be solved by landscaping necessarily. So what we need to decide then.
Especially with nighttime lighting, too.
Well,
I think the lighting piece,
I wouldn't allow.
but so if that's the case, then what is a reasonable distance? If 20 feet, which is proposed, if that's far enough away that that's good, then we just need to clean up our language as to what we want to be governed by those 20 feet, which it sounds to me like we want to have all sports courts. But we need to decide, is 20 feet the number, or is there a different increment that's a better number? Right?
What do you think, John?
No, I think those are, if what I'm hearing, noise and visual are the major concerns, then today our ordinance provides a 20-foot distance from an adjoining property, right? And just for purposes of where we are today, I mean, we don't get a lot of those calls or questions about any of those today. So in my mind, 20 feet seems reasonable to keep that same distance as in the ordinance. So I would.
But for 20 feet, you're looking at an enclosed structure, though, versus an outside court,
Yeah.
right?
No, this applies as written in our code today. It's a 20-foot separation for a private tennis court. That's in the code today.
But Padel isn't enclosed, I think is what Jean's saying.
To some degree,
Is it
yes.
possible to just treat this issue as either conditional, where you do case-by-case reviews for all these factors?
That's what I mentioned a few moments ago. We could add in specific things of proper screening, even increasing the distance, those types of things.
Okay, so maybe we need to do a little more work on this rather than take more time on this today. Shall we do a little more work and get some wording, maybe some conditions applied to this?
We can table for
Does that make sense?
Oh, I'm fine with that. Do we need to move
Guys?
this along?
Larry, Jean, are you okay with that?
Absolutely, yes, I'd like more time.
Okay, yeah, and I think, so we need to look at the height issue.
Exactly.
That gentleman made a fair point that, we just picked that number and we have to look at that. And the lighting, my inclination is to keep the no lights. What does the rest of you think?
Yeah, I don't know how you effectively screen lights on a tennis court, no matter what you put in front of it, landscaping wise. I mean, I know,
I would tend to agreement. The ability, I mean, there are some really talented design professionals that I think could accomplish it. But I think it encourages the use in a more tight window, which would play
It's
into
going to be hard to enforce a noise ordinance on a court sport. So I think not lighting it helps enforce that.
yeah.
Okay, so to move on with this, then we're going to,
Well, can I raise one question too?
Oh, sure,
Can we dictate hours of operation for sports courts so that they're only permitted between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. or something, or no?
Are you going to go write tickets?
well, I think by not having lights, we limit the hours.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't want to tell people they couldn't play at 8
yes,
a.m. on a
that
hot
is
day.
permissible. To the administrative powers for that would be,
All right.
yeah.
Enforcement is an issue, right?
All right, well, shall we table approval of this section until we get new wording and have a little time to think about it? So if you could send us some new wording on this, John, and everyone can weigh in on their thoughts before the next meeting so we can approve it at the next meeting. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so the idea is to broaden this to apply to all sports courts and then potentially consider adding some conditions, maybe additional distance to what is set forth in this.
That's what I'm hearing.
I agree. I think we need to understand the scope of the impact it would have. I think most of what we've thought about has been from the street or from noise, but I think we need to think of visual also from the next door neighbors. That would be my thought.
Okay, this has had first reading. Is it okay if we, Mac, don't approve this until September and then town council can deal with it after we're okay on our timeline for that?
That's fine. I mean, technically, I think under the statute, council could take it up, but every time y'all have deferred or tabled to get more information, they've respected this
Okay.
body and not done that. So
All right, can I have a motion, please?
Motion to table for additional language, is that what the motion would be?
Yeah, because I don't think we want to approve it
Okay.
piecemeal.
I make a motion to table while we clarify language on sports courts.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Larry, you voting?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Abstentions, hearing none. Okay, this is tabled till the next thing. All right, next item. Zoning text amendment update on establishing the Town of Keel Island architectural review controls. Sandy and Rob worked on this. John has some comments. I'll let you guys take the lead.
Yeah, I'll just open and then Sandy, you guys want to add anything? And then I think Mark wants to also provide comments here. So you recall at our last planning commission meeting, we introduced a brief to set the stage for the town establishing its own design.
John?
Yes.
John, was that the only, I'm sorry for interrupting, but was that the only issue that came back to us from town council was what we just discussed, or did you have some others?
No, the accessory use section was the only sections outside of the field clarity that I mentioned prior to that, where that town council discussed, yeah. Just recapping, and with the town establishing its own architectural review controls, a reference at our last planning commission meeting that the purpose is for the town to have a vehicle to be able to introduce architectural design standards with the town being that entity body. To date, the town, the Keel Island Community Association, as you all are aware, of the last 2 years or more, had a task force in place to look at the review and the transition of the existing Keel Island Architectural Review Board. And so that process still is sort of in uncertainty. It's been the desire for the town to make some more certainty in moving forward with that. And so this particular item of where we are today is that Sandy and Rob have been selected from our last meeting as sort of the spearhead to be able to look at next steps. What we anticipate is for us to look at the framework, the structure, to go ahead and establish at least the meets and bounds of what this board would look like, what their purview and et cetera would be. And the more sort of difficult challenge, or at least more preciseness, would be understanding what those particular standards would be around what their review purview would be. And so where we are is still sort of in a study phase, but I just let you know that this is anticipated to continue down a rhythm. But the intent is for the town to have its own architectural review controls. And I think, Rob, if you want to add anything, Sandy, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is correct. The scope is specific to commercial and to multifamily at this point. And what we suggested is that John and his team move forward to draft the ordinance, which I think at least one model has been identified, very, very simple and straightforward, for review in the September session. But as John's pointed out, you just don't decree this into being. You need to create the standards and the criteria and process and that type of thing, some of which is bounded by state statute, I believe.
Correct.
So it's not
Correct.
inventing a wheel.
So the same exercise that we went through to establish our tree preservation board, where that models our state statute, where a local municipality, local jurisdiction have the ability to introduce architectural standards. And so we'll follow that same rhythm, essentially, of determining how many members need to be on the board, determining what they need to review, et cetera. And that's all constituted, as Sandy just shared, in our state statute.
Yeah, so, the headline being that, we came back generally supportive of the concept, and it does feel that the prior efforts on the joint task force have somewhat stalled. Maybe they will be reincarnated in some way. But in the meantime, there are decision voids as it relates to properties that are within the town boundaries that today are not subject to, the existing ARB, yeah, and other future activities that make sense to have some, basically to get ahead of.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would mention is with the town architectural review control, this would broaden the scope of any property within the town's jurisdiction. So not just any property right now behind the gates or subject to the existing Key Island architectural review, but any property. So even if future properties were to be annexed, then we would have cover from an architectural review standpoint into the town, from the town.
Thank you, John. Mark, I think this is where you want to make a few comments before we continue our deliberations on this.
First of all, I have zero comment about the architectural review board thing. I'm pulling very hard for you on that. I have a list of comments for each of the tabs that I'd like to hand this out and then just mention it as we discuss each tab, if that's okay.
Okay.
So you're moving on to the next topic then?
No, we're not.
Okay.
We haven't finished this topic.
Okay.
I'm sorry I don't have a way to get it to the other members.
Okay, but these relate to agendas that we haven't gotten to yet. Agenda topics. Oh.
Okay,
think
well,
some of
let
it's
us finish
ARB.
our architecture review thing then, because this is,
Okay, I'm sorry.
let's-
I have no
yeah.
comment. I have no comment about tab.
okay, and,
Are those comments available electronically, so Larry?
Want me to
can
send
see
you a
them?
picture?
yeah,
a good
I
idea.
can do that too.
I gotcha.
You got it, you
Yep,
got
I'll
his
get it.
text?
I think
Okay.
I have everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You have Larry too?
I think I do, Larry.
Okay, I haven't.
Larry, we're going to have Daniel email a copy to you guys.
Oh, that's probably even better.
All right.
All right, so to continue the discussion, so your recommendation is that John go ahead and get this, an ordinance, some framework for us to deal with in the September meeting.
Correct.
Any other discussion on that? Agreement, disagreement, thoughts? How about a motion?
I make a motion to,
I don't think we need a
Yeah.
motion here
Okay.
on this.
We don't need a motion
Okay.
to record?
Yeah,
okay,
we've
so-
already started that process, so it's just, but this was kind of just an update for for this period of where we are.
Okay, so on the, at the September meeting, we will have something to hopefully vote on to send to town council.
Yeah, for consideration yeah.
Okay, okay, great. All right, next item. The proposed beach overlay. Mary Beth has been a hero on this one. I'm going to let you take charge. Mary Beth and staff have done a phenomenal job on this. I just will say, you know, the whole purpose and intent, everything I think was very clear, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. You did a great job, so take it away.
I'm going to believe that most folks have read through this. Generally, because of the development patterns on the island, different parts of the island recognize their proximity to the oceanfront differently than other parts. Many parts of the island have a parcel between the dunes and the ocean that Kika owns, a land parcel, but that's not true everywhere. So in an effort to protect habitat, protect dunes, and protect line of sight, we are looking at a way to establish an overlay. This that is laid out here, as we've thought about it a bit more.
Mary, I
Yep.
just want you to know I have some slide decks, so if I can
Oh.
walk through everything.
Why don't you walk
and then
through? Yep, all you.
Yeah.
And thank you also for the work you've done.
Oh, no, John and Daniel have done
I
a lot.
walk through, I just want to ask, do you want Mark to share after I do the interview or share before, since he's provided these comments? How would you want that to?
Well, let's go through what we're doing first.
Yeah, so we have context.
Yeah, so there's context, and I see, and then he can talk about the tab. He has some comments on tab 4.
So what I did is I wanted to give the planning commission, you guys have the profile brief, sort of summary of what I think directionally, but I just want to add some additional context to where we are today from that document. So this proposed beachfront overlay zoning district, we've established a framework, and the framework was kind of centered around these key factors in our early discussion. So I'm going to walk through those key factors and then walk through the actual sort of components of the proposed overlay. So when we look at Kiowa, our developed beachfront properties are largely single-family residential when we look at the entire profile. Remaining undeveloped lands that are beachfront are primarily non-single-family residential. We are, as we just kind of are going through our comprehensive plan update, we understand that most of Kiowa has been developed. And when we look at our beach profile, many of those properties that are remaining to be redeveloped or have been undeveloped or non-single-family residential. In recent times, we have seen multifamily developments that have created a larger mass structures with more prominent visual down in the West End. And so this was one, from a visual standpoint, of impact to the beach, another sort of factor to the components of why this particular concept of an overlay for the Kiowa Beach is being considered. One of the unique things about Kiowa in its design and in its inception, pretty unique compared to any other jurisdiction or beach community, is that there's been a thought of the development being pushed further away back from the actual ocean itself. And that was uniquely done by the original developers of the island. And most of that land has now been conveyed to the community association and what I'm calling a unique protection layer that traverses majority of the entire island, except for a few call-outs, which I've listed below. There's a few down in the West End, the Royal Beach section of the sort of center part of the island. Additionally, regarding our beachfront setbacks, they do range. So there isn't a standard setback for all properties across the beachfront. So whether it's a residential lot on Eugenia versus a really deep lot on Flyway or Surf Song, those rear setbacks do vary in depth. And so they range from 20 feet to almost 120 feet in certain cases, but majority of them fall in that range there. We do have the additional resort zoning district categories, where recently, I say recently, but several years ago, a tiered sort of height application was applied to our RST zoning district, where you see a stepped effect in the height based on the distance away from the ocean. Additionally, I want you to recognize that another part of this equation has been, when we do look at our entire beach profile, the center part of our island around Eugenia Avenue, there are some challenges regarding the distance and separation of where our baseline is. And so there is some concern for long-term resiliency. We have done in the past a few scraping projects along the beachfront renourishment in certain sections of the ocean, of our beach profile, but that baseline jurisdictional line that we have generally accepted that Kiowa has a healthy accreting beach. There are some areas of sections that I'll just label it as areas of concern for resiliency, where properties of where that jurisdictional line is now begin to think how those would encroach into highlands of those subject properties, residential lots. For just the edifice of the commission, or the town recently modifies its beachfront management ordinance. And so one of the key component is how we've treated now the definition of our beach profile, our beachfront, which it also encompasses that primary dune. And so we want to be able to now broadly not just look at the area of where the setback line is, but really where the primary dune is, because that is also a key part to the health, ecological function of the beach. And more in the distant, but in the near future, the state will be exercising its review of the setback baseline, those jurisdictional lines. Kiowa, we're looking slated in the spring, summer of 2026 for that process, and that's an integral part. In contemplating how we went about developing this beachfront overlay, the question would be, how do we administer this? And so using a line that would be essentially in place, jurisdictional lines from 2018 was an already existing mapped reference point, and so that's kind of where the framework, or where we began.
John, what are the 2026 proposed? Do they have any yet? Lines?
Not yet.
Okay.
They go through the entire state, so I forget exactly where they are now in the process of where they are, but they go community to community and have engagement. Our segment time is early spring of next year, so we'll hopefully have more information by the end of this year, more specific. So this was a tool developed in-house, and Daniel primarily did all of the work here on this tool to kind of help us understand generally where our beach profile and what it looks like, and how to get just a broad conceptual standpoint of what's in place for the profile of the beach. And one of the things I mentioned about Kiowa being unique in its unique protection layer, that area in orange is the area that's been conveyed to the community association, property owner association, and that covers essentially majority of the beach profile. But this tool, I'll share this tool with you guys to kind of play with, and I think Mary Beth has seen it and has played with it a little bit, but just allows you guys to see where the jurisdictional lines interplay with the existing structures, Mr. GIS overlay, based on the framework of what we've established in the proposed overlay. So now I'll go to the actual development of the ordinance, where the purpose, I won't go through all these slides now because that's been in your materials, but really the consistent visual, spatial, and ecological transition zone is what we really wanted to be able to establish, being able to protect the ecological function in the oceanfront views, and also promote that resiliency component from a long-term standpoint, introducing compatibility, making sure that vegetation is consistent, and then ultimately making sure that there's a somewhat of consistent visual connection to the entire beach profile as best possible. We're looking at applicability. This would apply to all of the properties within this zone right now. That means that any property, just like our R2 overlay zoning district, any properties under this zoning district is overlay. The standards that would be developed in this would apply essentially on top of that base zoning district. Right now, what's being proposed is 150 feet from the jurisdictional baseline. And so any property within 150 feet would be subject to that. And we would be able to map that with more refined GIS overlay to kind of make sure that we capture any of those properties.
John, can I ask a question? I don't want to interrupt your flow, but is the horse already out of the barn? I mean, you know, how many properties are subject? And I'm looking at the nonconformities here. So anything that's existing, it sounds like would be exempted unless there's a redevelopment effort, correct? Yes. And then obviously the undeveloped properties that you mentioned, but is it like, as a percentage of, you know, sort of the whole beachfront, it seems like we're talking about some fairly narrow cases, is that right?
I would split the island maybe into 3, maybe 4 sections of where that there's a distinction in how this would be applied to different properties. To your point, yeah, there are a number of properties where this would impact existing structures, right? And so based on how the language is being thought about today, those would be grandfathered in, where they would be able to maintain or redevelop as the existing footprint.
So they can, okay, so maybe that's an area for, did you like kind of think about that? About the redevelopment aspect?
We did, and the redevelopment, so, I mean, if somebody comes back in with the same thing, you know, and they really fall under the 50% rule, then it's done, you're right. We can't undo it. So I would agree with you there, but there are a lot of times that a property is redeveloped, even a single-family home, that there are significant changes, and then this would apply. They wouldn't be grandfathered.
Okay.
Yeah, in
I mean, did you really think about
non-conforming
to your point, Sandy, to your point, I'm going to show one snapshot of a section of the beach profile where I think we would have to carve out for future development where this overlay would not be in place because that, or at least relax the standards significantly because you wouldn't be able to develop those properties. So I'll show you a section of that.
Okay, but just to be completely satisfied on this point about redevelopment, so you're saying that there's sort of a greater governance framework that would prohibit us from having an opportunity to review redevelopment, you know, to potentially be more restrictive? Or we're just basically acknowledging?
No, it would. So for example, and this has nothing to do with this overlay district, but just in terms of redevelopment in general, the magnitude of redevelopment you do dictates whether or not you're rebuilding as you have built today,
right.
Say a hurricane came through, or whether or not you have to play by rules that have gone into place since your property was originally developed.
Right.
So that would be the same thought process that would apply here. If something comes through and wipes your home out on a street and you are way beyond our setback, then could you rebuild exactly what you had before? Yes.
That's one condition, but if you, you know, voluntarily want to redevelop.
If you voluntarily redevelop, you have to play by the new rules, and that's
the new rules. But okay, so that was not clear here.
That's true for the overlay, but that's true for any place on the island.
Yeah, that's true. We did this with non-conforming properties
that's kind
when
of
we were doing rezoning.
Yeah. Because the reason I'm stuck on it is because it says renovations exceeding a certain percentage.
Well, and so haven't gotten there yet, but that is one place that, we need to state the 50%, we need to give all the nuances to that rule in here, just to make sure everybody understands. But that essentially would govern what's grandfathered.
So if it's under 50%.
Well, and 50%, it's 50% of the value of your structure. It's not 50% of the value of the total. If your improvements exceed 50% of the value of your structure,
Right, I get it.
that's the spirit
and
of the 50%
is that an arbitrary
rule.
number, or did you come to?
No,
did you
that's
come
a
to
FEMA,
regulations?
that goes back to
Okay.
FEMA, and that's
Okay.
a federal number that we use for flood insurance, the way we're ranked for flood insurance on the island. And I'm sure I'm not articulating that perfectly, but that's the gist of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So this gets into just zooming in a little bit on this interactive tool, and I won't, because we're just in a sort of conceptual form still and where we are, I'll zoom through this piece, but I think we can send this link out to you guys and you guys can kind of see a little bit more in detail of this interactive tool. So the orange that's labeled, that's Kika owned property. The area, the red line, that's the baseline, and then the blue line is the setback line. And so you can see the proposed hatched or cross-hatched section. That would be a new standard of the buffer zones established, where certain parameters would be established there of restricting or relaxing standards in those areas. So the thing I want to call out in this particular section here, for example, this is the sandcastle. If we were to, and we pulled out Eugenia because Eugenia was an interesting piece of where a lot of the beach profile was really already close to the ocean. So you can see now the sandcastle's pool at the rear would fall into that zone. And so the question I have to the commission, what would you want to see happen in that area? Would you want to see pools be able to be established in that area? Would you not want to be able to see pools established in those areas? This area, of course, is the narrow section of the beach profile. When we get further east, you'll see that there's a greater amount of what I'm calling just wiggle room between the ocean and the highlands or subject properties. Just continue a little bit further here, you can see now that zone is now entered into actual building structures of properties on Eugenia. And so to your question, what do we apply to those properties? So those are the things that I would want you guys to begin to think about and how we treat existing structures and their ability to redevelop with the cognizant, with in mind the ability to think forward and saying, we have a goal in mind, but we still want people to be able to develop their properties in the best way from a resilient manner.
I'm sure this is the right question to ask, but maybe as we dig in further, a question to ask would be, if you use the example of Eugenia, the road Eugenia sort of bounds the other side of the property. So if the developable area is reduced because of this overlay, how does that affect lot coverage?
Well, if you look, a
Is
lot
that
of
the right
these are
question?
built, it looks like a lot of these houses are built
Forward.
very forward.
Right.
So they have plenty of room, some of them.
That's
A
kind
lot
of what I'm asking. So
Yeah,
if
they have
they,
room.
so they could conceivably
Move back.
move back
if
and
they
stay
had to.
within the allowable
Exactly, and-
footprint and lot coverage.
And still accomplish.
May-
And I think, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say many of these are on a case-by-case basis, right? Because it really determines on the setbacks of that lot, determines on the property owner's design wishes and square footage of the lot, et cetera. But from a pragmatic standpoint, from a zoning standpoint, we would want to consider, in my mind, being able to relax standards in this zone because of the constraints here, because of what the context of what's happening with the beach profile in this section. You still would have your beach profile that you're protecting, but maybe this property owner has the ability to do something different. Maybe their setbacks or something different. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but these are the things that we need to have discussion regarding because of the dynamics here in this cross-section of the beach.
And are you pretty much finished with your presentation since we've got some editorial there?
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Yeah. So just continuing two more slides on images here. This is near Sanctuary Hotel. And as we get further east, you can see now in that orange portion, which under Kika own, it now pushes further out to the ocean, right? So there's a greater distance, and here's near the Royal Beach section, there's a greater distance, as you can see, of area between the buffer zone and where the property lines are of those established lots on the beach. If you can tell, these lots are 120-foot setbacks in some of these, but these are deep flag lots that are on Flyway. So, any questions about that piece before I continue? Just looking at the continued sort of framework here that's been established, one of the things is being able to understand that any uses that are permitted today, we're not looking to change any of the uses. So if it's residential, if it's resort, if it's whatever that base zoning district, those would still be in play. The one thing that I'm listening is TBD, and it's come up in some of our resiliency discussions. It's come up in some of our the discussions of a broader regional standpoint for seawalls on the beachfront. Maybe you've paid attention to what's happening in other communities around us, the ability to restrict seawalls and harder erosion control devices on the beachfront because of its challenges. That's something that I think that this could also accomplish with this overlay. So I'll go with this, but I know there's some additional things that have been introduced, just discussion with Mary Beth in proposing. So what the ordinance, not even ordinance, what the framework outlines is establishing two zones. One will be essentially more restrictive than the other, and B, which is the more restrictive, essentially no structure would be permitted, and the other being sort of a height maximum that's being proposed today. These are some other considerations that we can enter into, thinking about modulated building height, additional vegetation screening, native landscaping, those types of things. Turf grass has become a thing of many properties. Maybe that's something that wouldn't be permitted in these areas. We already have a beachfront management ordinance that talks about lighting. If there are additional things regarding lighting on the beach profile, we could insert them here from a development standards. From a review process, the only thing that's being recommended, it will go through our standard permitting process, and any of those are non-single family would go through site plan review, but we would also ask that there be coordination with our environmental department to ensure that that primary dune is best protected or least disturbed. And that's a practice that we've done to date, even though it's not codified anywhere. This was kind of mentioned earlier just regarding nonconformities. We did think about nonconformity, and so this would just apply to how we treat nonconforming uses today and structures. And then where there are applications where there might be too strict of application, of course, we've introduced relief, which may be granted by Board of Zoning Appeals. The additional thoughts is that maybe there'd be a tiered system where some would be approved administratively before it needs to even go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so that might be another opportunity for us to discuss. Mary Beth, I included just a thought to just have one zone, as kind of we mentioned, just having the one buffer zone. And so I'll stop there because I think more now it's more about discussion and next steps. I know Mark wanted to share. So.
And just to before we go there, I think one thing we've been exploring more recently is how we set up some administrative. What is my language that I'm looking for?
Yeah, that's the last.
John's last slide there. How we have it set up so that administratively, folks we could allow exceptions with administrative approval, but the exceptions would need to abide by certain area, certain tree limits on tree removal and certain height restrictions.
Yeah, so
we're going down that road.
I quickly do like one standard that we potentially could consider, which is improved areas of taking a percentage of your maximum lot coverage and applying that to be no greater, that could be. If it's less than that, it can be administratively approved. If it's greater, maybe it's kicked to the BZA. So these are just, like I said, concepts, ideas. We'll flesh it out more in detail. I would want your feedback as we kind of continue to move forward.
How is the 10-foot height established, the maximum 10-foot height? Because, I mean, is that from ground level? Is that from the flood level?
It would be from flood level, base flood elevation. Just, I mean, unless we change our definition of height, right now it would apply the same way we treat structures where we're looking at that base flood elevation.
But it was ground level because we were thinking about pools. I mean, if there's a flood level, we wouldn't want a pool that's 20 feet in the air.
Unless we modify the definition of that, then we could
That's
change
something
that.
we need to clarify and think
Yeah.
about.
Well,
Yeah,
10
for sure.
feet doesn't get you very much. I mean,
But that's why it was really for pools. You could do a pool with 10 feet.
But I mean, there are properties where you would want to have a bathhouse or something that would.
even a shade structure or
Shade-
something,
yeah,
you know.
those types of things.
I mean, you look at some of these, you know, everything starts above, you know, from 11 feet or wherever your flood line is. I mean, for the most part. So there are pools that are, you know, probably 15 feet in the air.
But,
And that's something we wouldn't
but
want
I
right
mean,
on
that
the
might be
beachfront.
that more pools had to be, in that zone, had to be in ground as opposed
Yeah.
to on an elevated structure. So I think we need to think about that more, but there's probably more than one way to skin that cat.
Yeah. So we have a lot of discussion points. Mark, do you want, I mean, I've read through your tab 4. Do you want to make your comments on the beach overlay?
Yes, essentially, I outlined it in my bullets. The bullet that's in bold text, the sampling that we saw here was a good example of that, where we begin to apply the standards to different conditions and see what they mean in terms of potential impact. So that was very helpful.
We've done a lot of that with that map, even have some lists, but would be good. Mhm.
Right. The only thing I'd caution is that when you do studies like this, the width of the actual line, scale-wise, might be 5 feet. So 5 feet might make a huge difference to someone on Eugenia. Eugenia is the one that's most impacted by this. But by way of example, the Sandcastle pool would qualify, as I understand it. It's within the 50 to 100-foot
Exactly.
zone, so
Yeah.
it's in the zone, but it qualifies. Is that a fair?
I think that it's generally, yes.
Right.
I
yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah, so the idea, the only other question I have, which I didn't put down in the bullet, is the district starts at 150 feet. Why wouldn't it start at 100 feet?
So I believe, and John and I, we talked about that a little bit yesterday. I'll let John explain, but I can tell you too.
We almost had it start at 300 feet, which might not have been greater. But the idea is that 150 feet seemed like a portion that we would be able to capture any beachfront property. So absent it, if you had any standards applied to it within the zone, I wish I would.
That Kika parcel that runs across the front?
So these parcels here, that distance is nearly almost 150 feet to reach those. And so that was sort of the attempt. 150 feet would have been a number that we could potentially reach those.
I still don't understand. What happens between 100 and 150 feet? Are there any standards for that zone?
That's where
What's
you
being
had
proposed,
originally
there'll
the
be no
50
standards right
feet,
now being
no,
proposed
you
for
can't do
Wait,
anything.
I'm not sure I'm totally understanding your question.
As I understand it, the district, like a classic zoning district,
Right, would
Starts-
extend 50 more feet beyond the 100-foot line. Is that what you're saying?
that's correct. So
Okay.
I'm asking, what happens between 100 feet offset and 150 feet. Why is there 150 feet?
Wasn't that because in 50 feet?
It doesn't
remember-
follow any property line.
Right, well, we can't really follow a property line because of the
No,
way
I
the property
know.
lines are
but
established.
I'm just trying to understand,
I-
what precipitated 150 feet?
We want to protect the maritime forest
So-
as much as possible.
If you apply, just, I'm gonna use the graphic up here. The 100 feet starts from this red line, essentially the hash lines, right? The 150 feet would have been able to essentially apply to any property so that we are able to capture the actual subject property. So whereas on here, this is Flyway, any of these properties could be subject to standards, and there aren't any standards being proposed.
Well, that's what it was a leading question because there are no standards now.
Yeah.
So there's going to be consideration of additional standards in the 100 to 150 range?
Not being recommended today. This is the most healthy piece, what I would say, from a beach profile, where there might need to be no standards in. But that area, if there were additional standards, I think it would be a fair opportunity to apply standards, as this area is below, or these areas here would be in a transition zone. So if there are other standards that would apply to vegetation or any of those types of things, that would be something.
I understand it potentially being applied to Osprey Beach, which is that subdivision on the right side there. But the overwhelming frontage on Kiowa, if you applied 150 feet, it would capture like a lot of houses in whole. Like all of Eugenia, all the houses on Eugenia would be captured, not
Yes.
just partially.
And-
So I'm trying to,
Yeah.
it's not a leading question, I'm just trying to understand why 150 feet.
Well, it's from the
No, that's what I
baseline.
shared earlier. So in order to, I think there are opportunities to either restrict or even relax standards because of the situations that we have based on that beach profile. So if we don't have a mechanism to grab those properties to allow those things to happen,
How about this? How about we spend some more time thinking about that and figuring out exactly what we're trying to do with that 150 and come back to you sometime? No, I think we need to develop that thought process a little bit more. So thank you.
Because Mark, there is obviously beaches are dynamic.
Yep.
That area that's between the 100 and 150 feet, the beach could come up and that, it may be that the dune system's now at 100 feet and that 50-foot zone is all that protects the beach dune system there, and they have the ability then to set standards and regulate that. I don't know if that was the idea, but that was a hypothetical I thought of potentially.
I think you hit the nail on the head. What we need to do is we need to understand better where we're most likely to have those instances, and they're probably the same places that we already have homes that would have to be grandfathered. I mean, that's the most likely place
Right.
that the beach is unstable.
Yeah.
So we need to think that through a little bit more.
And starting next year, there is a reasonable likelihood that the baseline is going to move in some fashion. Now, we have a beach that's propagating, so it would be shockingly surprising if it goes more inland,
Right,
but it can't go more oceanward.
exactly.
So-
And from my conversations with folks, that would support that it's unlikely. But, I mean, the places that our beach is less stable, if we want to just call it that, Eugenia is one of them. We've had to renourish there.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
yeah.
That's the only comment I had about tab 4.
Okay.
I did have a comment on tab 2 when given the opportunity.
Let us finish
Yeah.
4 first. Well, let's focus on this. So next steps, are we going to try to have something before us to approve at the September meeting?
We are going to try.
Okay.
That is our goal.
So that's the goal, to have something to approve in September. Anybody who has comments, questions, Mary Beth and John are going to be
Yeah, call me.
be working on this, and we'll hopefully come up with something that we can then send to town council in September. Okay.
The other thing, just to note on this, is I'm 99.9% sure that the Department of Environmental Services, specifically the Bureau of Coastal Management, is going to have to review and approve this before it's ultimately adopted by council, because it is a zoning ordinance that would apply to some of the critical area beach
Okay.
zone system under the statute.
Okay.
Oh, that's, John, you know how to do that. Okay,
Madam Chair, I apologize. I did want to have one other statement, which is, there's a reference to development within the BOD shall have modulated building heights. Now, in my architectural training, I don't know what the definition of modulated is. So I would suggest just,
Spell that.
I would look at that, and if, I think I understand what is being proposed.
Yeah,
I would be more definitive to the
Okay.
nature of it.
Super. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, okay, and your comments on tab 2, just since we've been through that already, you think parking lots should be added as a permitted use within the community support.
If I could explain that?
No, I see what I see where you're going.
As I understand it, we're proposing the introduction of a new dedicated use parking structure not as an ancillary use, but as a use.
Yeah, a lot, not a structure. It is not a parking structure.
A lot, okay. All of them were proposed to be within commercial districts or resort districts, if I'm not mistaken. But it didn't include the utility tract, which is the CS. In fact, the utility tract was designed for community, like service-based systems. And at one time during the Kuwaiti period, we had an employee parking lot there that employees would drive to, and then employees were transported to each of the resort facilities. I would strongly urge that that use be permitted as a matter of right within the utility tract. It's a classic sort of community support system in terms of
We didn't
parking
think of
lot.
that, John and I'll go over that. It's a good
Yeah.
point, thank you. Okay, moving on. Let's see, new business. Zoning text amendment AZ 025-00008, modified zoning district standards. John, you want to go through it?
Yes. Members of the commission, we have, under our base zoning district, several recommended changes that relate to lot coverage, height, and setbacks as the primary standards. Those would apply to residential, resort, commercial, or community support, or parks and recreation zoning districts. What I'm going to do is just go through each of the sections and highlight those specific recommended changes. And if there are questions, we can have those discussions as we go through each of the sections. I think that would be appropriate since there are several zoning sections. And if from there, any questions that you have. So under R1 and R2, those are our base residential zoning districts. R1, R2, R3, of which the first two, R1 and R2, there are no changes. The recommended change of R12, section 12-67, R3 residential. If you're following along, this is on page 5 of 16. On the second page of that, the multifamily and townhouse designations for their maximum lot coverage being reduced from 60 to 40%. Under the commercial designation of zoning district 12-68, the maximum lot coverage being 70%, recommendation of 50%. Under RST1, our resort zoning district, I'll walk through this a little bit slow because there are several changes here that are being recommended. The first being the 70% lot coverage to 50% lot coverage, and under the maximum building heights and minimum setbacks, you'll see that there is a now introduced tiered system for height that is contextually related to the setbacks. And this kind of mirrors the RST2 zoning district. These two districts, the resort districts, really apply to primarily two locations on the island, the RST1 being the east beach area of where the Sanctuary Hotel exists. And so I do want to note that the recommendation that's listed here of reduction of the 70% to 50%, these would create non-conforming structures there based on what the lot coverages are. For the zoning districts, the oceanfront height, not height, the oceanfront minimum setbacks that are listed marry the tier system of starting from 150 feet at 55 stories, at 55 feet, 4 stories, and traverse down to 3 stories, 55 feet on the oceanfront, being 150 feet rear setback, 100 feet at 45 feet and 2 stories in height, and then 60 feet rear setback on the ocean, or anything at 35 and 1 story. 40 feet rear setback on the ocean for those things that are 10 feet and below.
John, can I ask a question before you go on?
Yes.
When we talk about the maximum height with stories and feet in the middle of that chart, does that include the parking surfaces under the building, or is that the total maximum permissible height of the building?
It's measured from a base flood elevation, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can imagine that essentially would be 3 stories over parking. If that's kind of relatively a rule of thumb. It's not exact, but rule of thumb. That base flood elevation would be first finished floor typically. I mean, or around above that parking area.
Okay, thank you.
The other suggestions here that are before you are regarding the footnotes that are listed in this section, the elimination of 2 of those footnotes, which related specifically to things that would have already been applied. So under footnote 1, smaller non-residential lots may be permitted by the town council as part of the plan development. Plan developments are such that, we've highlighted that if it's a plan development, it would need to go through that process. So it's kind of repetitive and we eliminated that. And then the height in the RST1 zoning district applies to hotels, associated activities. It's more suggested that particular section would have leaned that other types of uses would not have had the same height applicability, so that was also recommended to be eliminated. Under the RST2 zoning district, the primary change here is the elimination of the 4 stories. That first column, 4 stories, 50 feet, 55 feet in height. So the maximum would be 3 stories, 55 feet in height. For changes in, we also looked at the oceanfront setbacks as well, to where you have that tiered system. The one additional change that I forgot to mention now on the RST1 is the introduction of the oceanfront rear setback, but we also included in the materials that was sent out to you in the second sheet, just the non-oceanfront properties. And so that also introduces a tiered height. Similarly, the same items removed under the footnotes of those sections regarding the height applying to hotels, associated activities under footnote 6, and then footnote 10, parcels under development agreement. Moving to the community support zoning districts, no changes being recommended there. Under the Parks and Recreation zoning district, there's a proposed change for the maximum lot coverage of 70% to 60%, and similarly also for the Parks and Recreation Ocean Course zoning district. Madam Chair, those are the highlights of it. I don't know if you would like to provide any additional context before the further discussion or.
I'd just like to say, for people to understand the impetus, some of us have been talking about this for over a year now as we've worked on the comprehensive plan in the housing and land use section. What we're hearing from the community and is reflected in the goals and objectives of the comp plan is wherever possible, wherever we can, we want to limit density. We have a traffic problem, we have stress on our infrastructure, we have loss of our natural habitat. So wherever we can limit density, we want to do that. Not concerned at all about non-conforming structures. Anytime towns do rezoning, there are going to be things that are non-conforming, and that's okay. They stay non-conforming, they're grandfathered in, it's not a problem. Our goal is to do whatever we can to protect our island. That's what our community is asking us to do. So that's where this is coming from. And it's been coming for a long time. Go, Mark.
It's okay. First and foremost, I strongly support the effort by the Planning Commission to revisit standards in the land use classification. Quite frankly, it's long overdue. The standards that we have right now are not aligned with the existing development out there. And I'm not just saying this on behalf of intense resort development. I'm saying it on behalf of individual property owners, residential property owners. We had a case this morning at the ARB where someone on Clay Hall in an area that's zoned R1, and it's part of a series of lots that are not, the lot area alone is not standard to the R1 zone. And it's zoned R1. We have an enormous number of conditions that aren't in the category that is usually the hit target for changes in zoning, which is undeveloped land or commercial land or whatever. The biggest problem we have is all the non-conforming residential uses. I understand your comment because you said it consistently, it shouldn't matter. But when we have a zoning classification, a zoning ordinance that is so out of sync that now with the additional proposals here, essentially all multifamily is now non-conforming. That makes no sense. Why wouldn't we have zoning that is at least sensitive to existing development and then have additional zoning classifications in certain categories that align with what you had indicated, which is an effort by the greater community to have a dial down, a more modest development in deference to the impacts associated with traffic. So where I'm coming from is I am aligned with revisiting this, but I think you should go deeper and truly test each of the cases within all of our zoning classifications, not just the ones that are the more intense development. Well, let me just go down to the third bullet. On page 4 and 5 of the document, which is in section 12-67, R3, the proposed reduction of lot coverage from 60 to 40% will result in overwhelming majority, if not all multifamily, being non-conforming. So why change this? Why develop zoning ordinances that are ethereal in nature as opposed to consistent with what the normal practices are?
Can I just ask you, Mark, then, because this is geared for future development. So would you recommend creating whole new zoning for undeveloped land? Because the goal, the townhouses and multifamily that are there, they're there, and that's fine. But just because they're there and we're developed densely doesn't mean we want future undeveloped land. That's what we're trying to get at. Future undeveloped land we want that developed less densely.
That's
Or
what
are
I
you
would.
saying create a new zone?
That's what I would suggest, that you have zoning classifications that are, at least as a minimum, aligned with existing development as much as possible. There's still going to be non-conforming houses that are over setbacks and stuff. I mean, the homes that were built in the 70s and 80s had different standards. That's just a reality. But I would suggest, rather than to try to have zoning classifications that try to do everything but they don't end up doing anything, is consider new additional zoning classifications in particular areas of concern. I think that's a reasonable alternative to consider. I still would recommend that you go back to the core zoning of existing, that relates to existing development, and update it in an effort to get more situations that are aligned with what the existing conditions are. If you remember, we had two alternatives. Let me give you one example. We had two alternatives, pathways, to address the Ocean Park zoning change out there. And the Planning Commission was unduly responsive. So I want to reinforce that to the request. And the idea, the path chosen was a map amendment to correct that, because the R1 category addressed the side yard question. The other alternative would have been a text correction, because it's an error. If you look at the R2 category in a particular lotting type, the 8,000 to 11,999 square foot, it is out of line with the same lot category in the R1 and the R3. It was a typo. That's a simple correction to consider. So I'm just using that as an example, but I buried the lead. I agree with the idea of considering additional zoning classifications that would warrant perhaps undeveloped areas or adjustments to areas that you know are likely to be changed over time. I think it's a reasonable examination.
Can I ask in that case, and I don't know if this is realistic or not realistic, but if there was to be significant redevelopment of multifamily that would fall within this with this category, how would that, if a separate what am I looking for, zone or whatever was created for new and for undeveloped, how would a redevelopment essentially be?
That's exactly what I'm sitting here wondering, because some of what we're trying to capture, I think, is should things be redeveloped, what should the standard be? And so
Because
would
that is
you
an
then have
opportunity.
separate redevelopment standards as well?
Well, I think that's part of the exercise that we're talking about.
But that's
is
what
to
I'm wondering.
consider that. Now, first and foremost, what is the history in the resort community development world for redevelopment of multifamily? Almost zero. And the reason being is the requirements of that association's membership to blow something up or even change the skin is so high. It's a super majority. They hardly ever get it. They hardly ever get the votes to redevelop, in a sense. So the only other redevelopment world is catastrophe, wipeout. And the way it works right now, as you pointed out, Madam Chair, is you can rebuild to the previous standards that were there, absent life safety questions that have to be updated on things. So, I think that this part of the conversation, I think, would be a healthy sort of at least a little bit of time dedicated to, well, what if? Maybe, what are you have in mind certain hotspots that would be considered for redevelopment in your mind. Well, what are the cases of how the standards should be considered there? I think that's reasonable. But the way it exists right now, let me take an extreme example. The R3 category in the multifamily only allows for 4 units in a building and 2 stories. Now, is that appropriate beside the tallest building in windswept if it's R3? It makes no sense. So the idea of introducing another, either adjust that, which I think that should be adjusted because multifamily shouldn't be limited to less than townhomes in terms of height. But the idea is maybe there's a different residential zoning classification that would be considered, that would recognize the zone between the Sanctuary Hotel and the tallest building on Kiowa, the last windswept building, which I think is 6 stories. A multifamily building there of 2 stories and 4, I mean, do you see what I mean? It's not a good fit.
I think, though, I hear what you're saying. But again, just because windswept is 6 stories doesn't mean we want to allow a 4-story building near it. Our goal is still to reduce density, stress on the infrastructure, destruction of habitat. That's our primary goal here. And
so you think it's inappropriate to have a modulated building that would be next to that building where there's, if you look at the windswept profile from the very early phases to the latter phase, it does this. And the idea was it was I didn't support the tallest building. That's when I left the Kuwaitis, actually. But the idea was it was anticipating a future series of hotels that were going to be 6 stories. So the idea was it was modulating on that. I understand that we might want to consider a different era or lessons learned from past development going forward. But that's a sharp contrast between a 2-story building with 4 units in it and another building. That's the only part I was coming from, which is certain sites lend themselves well to consideration for density.
Aren't we as an island, though, in like the ARB, for example, isn't there some effort to goose the standard up?
Absolutely.
So would it be inconsistent for the standard for zoning to be improved, even if that means other things would be non-conforming?
Well, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm not understanding.
Would you agree with this, though, that if you look at if a pie chart of multifamily, single family, what category has destroyed more natural resources on the island?
Single family.
By not even close. Single family, low density development.
But doesn't it also have the lowest lot coverage of anything on the island?
Yes.
33 or 40%.
So I'm
saying, but I'm saying if you look at the aggregate,
right, being roads and infrastructure.
Right.
Well, I'm venturing into other things that it would be good conversation going forward. But I support the idea of reflecting on the zoning classifications. And I'm also sort of pushing the notion to have our existing zoning classifications so out of sync with what's in place. That's not a healthy way. I was trying to find a planning philosophy that tracks that, and there is none. Because you actually want to have fewer non-conforming situations.
I mean, it's sunk.
Yeah,
We have what we have.
I mean, things are built, and I guess, I'm sure all of us, if we had our druthers, nothing else would ever be built and we'd leave our habitats as they are, but owners have a right to build.
And you know what? If that philosophy had been started at the beginning, none of us would be sitting here.
No, I hear you, but we're at the end stage development of the island now. So our goal is to limit future development where we can. Owners have a right to develop. You guys own property, you have the right to build something on it. We have the right as a town to somewhat constrain how dense that building can be, and that's what we're trying to do. That's what our comprehensive plan is telling us to do.
I agree with the C word, but I would use the word collaborate to try to find a path forward that we can, off of lessons learned and how we could work together to achieve balance. And the result would be more reasonable traffic pattern, all the things that we live with. Could I continue?
Yeah.
All right, on the back page, page 6 of 16, the commercial district. I've mentioned this before in the Kiowa Next plan, that the representation is the existing maximum FAR is 0.2, which is very low for our community, our high-end community type. I'd recommend 0.25 to be more appropriate. And the proposed reduction of the lot coverage from 70 to 50% is again inconsistent with all of my experience in high-end commercial development. Page 7 of 16, the RST-1 district. For those of you that are familiar with the existing development agreement with KIGR allows for, and it has a cap to it, but allows for expansion of the existing sanctuary hotel in a manner consistent with the architectural organization of that building to allow for another 175 rooms, which is 40 rooms per acre. The reason that was set up is all of the public infrastructure within the existing hotel, the lobby, the restaurants, the conference facility, all of the pool complex, all of that was sized for a future expansion of the hotel. I think that should be recognized in terms of the zoning classification and spelled out in very specific terms and not limited to 9 rooms per acre or 8 rooms per acre. Am I making sense here? Okay. Now, if for whatever reason KIGR would choose to add another hotel, separate freestanding hotel, between the sanctuary, say, and the last windswept building, no, it should meet the standards, the 8 or 9 rooms per acre. But I think there should be some recognition of rather expensive decisions made about the organization of the sanctuary hotel and the consistency of how that should be considered. That also applies to the height limit. The proposal here is to reduce the height limit from 70 to 55 feet. Well, the additional wing of the hotel should be consistent with the existing hotel, which is 70 feet. Am I making sense? Not that you agree, I'm just saying, do you understand what I'm saying on that?
What year was the sanctuary built? Could you just remember?
5, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's 20 years.
Yeah, it's
20 years.
Yeah, it opened in 2005, I'm pretty sure.
I think so, yeah. So I'm coming from a direction of consistency and understanding previous decisions made by that property owner of pretty significant improvements that have benefited our community in terms of, increased food and beverage and a variety of other, most certainly the conference facility. Page 8 of 16, the RST-2 district, West Beach. I'm in the same category. The decision, the existing conditions and the entitlements of the development agreement, the existing development agreement, allow for up to 150 rooms on their holdings. And why 150? If you remember, the original inn was 150 rooms. They have made significant capital improvements in West Beach, and of course we're waiting for the final act, but they've made a decision about the clubhouse, food and beverage, a major conference facility, a villa check-in room, and a little recreation pool area that was all based upon anticipating up to a 150-room hotel. If you apply the standards that are included in the draft proposal, it's substantially less than that. I am recommending that you consider to use the language in the development agreement based upon the significant improvements that the KIJR has already built in anticipation of that. And it's unclear to me, other than it's always better to have lower buildings, why you went from 4 to 3, other than we'd like lower buildings. So the issue there is, again, efficiency of land, that if you use 3 stories in the room count, you have to spread greater, as opposed to the efficiency of land use and the retention and natural framework if you go slightly higher. Ship watch is 4 stories. That's why the 4 stories is there. So it's compatible with the adjacent ship watch building. And the last comment I was going to make is in Parks and Recreation, Ocean Course District, the proposal was to go from maximum lot coverage from 70 to 60, which is fine. I'll end where I started, which is I wholly embrace, and to the extent I can help support the effort from a technical standpoint of revisiting the existing standards. I strongly urge that because they are so out of sync. It's like the standards don't mean anything when they're that far out of sync. I understand the comment of, well, we have a non-conforming provision of what happens when disaster strikes, a fire or whatever. But it puts the burden on the property owner. Many of these buildings in the multifamily area, I'm sure the town doesn't have existing drawings for those. So it puts the burden on the property owner to present what that building was before it burned down or blew away or whatever. Anyways, I'm repeating myself. Sorry.
I hear what you're saying. I'm not privy to anything going on with the development agreement. I think you're working on a new one. I have no idea. And I would assume that you could negotiate some of these things into a new development agreement. I still think our goals, and I'd like the rest of the commission to weigh in. I don't want to be the only one
So-
here. What do you all think about it?
I have a basic question, and I don't know who to direct it to, but whoever wants to answer it. How out of sync is the current, as it stands, without making any of these changes, all these red lines, how out of sync is it with the current development on the island? Is it still in sync with it, or is it out of sync?
There are a number of properties.
These zoning numbers, all these numbers, how many, is the non-conforming a very low number based within these numbers, or is it pretty tight?
There are a number of properties that are not conforming based on today's standards. Mark, you have a specific number.
Particularly after the development agreement expired
have it
and those
with me,
properties are
but
rezoned like timbers and others, that is a non-conforming use now.
Right, yeah, good point. The most recently built multifamily is non-conforming now because of rezoning. But I update a stat on all of the built for sale, which is largely multifamily, but it also includes cottages, Inlet Cove, Sparrow Ponds. And the last time I did it, before this proposal, 85% of the multifamily was non-conforming. This puts it at 100% because the ground coverage has changed. The proposal on ground coverage alone has changed the non-conforming.
Aren't a tremendous amount of our single-family homes non-conforming that were built before a certain date because the lot coverage has changed?
Yeah, there are a number of single family.
But I don't think it's just a couple, but the lot coverage.
No. Our zoning appeals sees.
I think a lot of this is date driven too, like when something was built, how old a property is.
Where I was heading is if we left it alone, let's say we just don't do any of this, there's still a lot of non-conforming uses. And if we just left it alone and did a separate column that said for undeveloped new development. I mean, literally another column in all these charts that says this is what it needs to be, which would be more towards what we're, trying to do is drive it down a little bit. I mean,
But we want
is that like a totally stupid, simplification of it? I mean,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, how does that then manage redevelopment?
So the one thing that I'll insert from, if we take a
well, you
step.
could call it redevelopment or new development. I mean, you'd have to define that column, whatever that column of things are.
I see what you're saying, but I think.
I mean, these may be, what we have now may be so far out of conformance that, I mean, maybe it's a moot point.
The one thing I'll mention, just taking a step back, we went through the comprehensive plan update process, and we understand that we're definitely in a redevelopment era. And so one of those strategies that is listed is that we really need to put in a mechanism to understand how redevelopment would behave for Kiowa, not just necessarily in the remaining parcels that haven't been developed that will be redeveloped, but from single family to multifamily to even commercial, that might be in tune now for redevelopment. And so there is, I think, opportunity if we create a vehicle to really hone in on what are those numbers, what are the impacts, and that might be a mechanism that the commission could, I hate the word task force, but begin really looking at redevelopment broadly, because that is where we are now. That's one of the principal strategies that will come out of the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So before really getting any true technical changes in, we could begin that process more intently, clearly.
That feels farther off, though, in terms of what that would do. John, I would want to hear from you in terms of this argument that this non-conforming dynamic puts somehow burden on decision making, whether it's at the ARB level or any other point in the process. I'm not sure. To me, that's a compelling argument. Is that really an issue?
So today, most of what we see, of course, because the multifamilies, as Mark stated, the regimes, the ownership of that facility, they have the abiding to do any changes. So all the improvements that we see from a redevelopment are single family.
Right.
Those, if I were to track, and we probably can pull some stats on this, of every variance case that we see now is an existing house where the setback is already through a portion of the building. So what that signals to us that we could potentially make changes in our zoning code to allow that, to allow a administrative or relief, but we've taken the presence now to apply a case-by-case basis because of their unique circumstances for many of these. Overall, I think the burden is still on the property owner because redevelopment is driven by the property owner. We're not initiating that process, so we would never know a time period of when it's responsibility to make any changes there. I think
I'm not really hearing a compelling case that somehow this issue of conforming, non-conforming puts a big burden. I mean, in my opinion, it's still a burden of the homeowner to understand what the rules are at any point in time. And they'll have an architect or they'll have other professionals that they're working with that presumably will be current on what the rules are.
I would agree with that statement. I mean, whenever there's, I'll give you an example away from Kiowa to maybe shift your frame. Typically, we would see a transition from a commercial development, a residential area. Think Savannah Highway, the section of going through Avondale, where you have all these residential houses that have now been converted to business or offices. And meaning just the traffic patterns have created a little bit more difficulty for that to be an actual residential neighborhood. On Kiowa, I don't see our actual land use pattern changing in that dynamic. So the only way for us to really get a hold of any future development is to look really closely at our design standards, our development standards of particular zoning districts. We are in a very complex, unique situation where the development agreement and original development of Kiowa, you have a built environment before our zoning code was enacted in 94. So there are a number of properties that are already subdivided, already built prior to us even implementing our zoning code. So that already puts that at, I'm not using the word disadvantage, but that's just part of the context of our equation. So I don't know where we are from a long-term standpoint if we just look at single-family residential and trying to do one thing there versus another strategy of looking at multifamily. I do think and when we did our housing study in 2019, that was one of the things that the consultants shared with us is how does Kiowa, and we have not addressed that as a town, how does Kiowa get property owners to reinvest when those multifamily properties are needing reinvestment? And that's part of, like to your point, that's probably a little bit further out, but if we continue to push that redevelopment further out, those properties will continue to age. I mean, this process right now is just being driven, I think, what we've really seen from where we are from a development standpoint and the burdens and stress that are put on infrastructure as Ms. Hennessy has shared. And so there should be some changes. What those changes are, maybe it takes a little bit more time to refine what those are. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I think there's a lot more pieces to the puzzle than maybe what's being presented today is just adjusting the height or just adjusting the coverage.
Well, that kind of prompts the second question I had. Because you attached the entire section, you attached section 12-80 around residential overlay zoning district. Do we have one of those? Do we use that?
Yeah,
Because
so
it's not in the land
that
use-
actually
I
is
didn't see
a
it in the land
good,
use chart.
that is actually probably a better example on the overlay zoning district of trying to allow standards for an era of existing homes to be compatible with future development.
How is this applied today? I didn't see this in the land use chart at all. I didn't see a column for.
This is an overlay zoning district, so this only applies to a handful of neighborhoods, Night Heron Cottages, Sprout Pond, those areas, where the base zoning is still R2, but there are additional standards that would apply under this. So the base zoning is still the R2 zoning district. So that's what you would see in the use table.
A lot of the patio house.
Right, yeah, okay.
And just to note, there is a section in the comprehensive plan which deals with redevelopment and possibly the town in some way becoming involved to help multifamily homeowners.
Right.
do
I
it.
mean,
So
I would
so
imagine
that's
if
a
that
separate thing.
task force launches, this would be one area for evaluation.
But I think, this is, as I said, we've been talking about this for over a year. I think these standards, changing these standards does help us get towards some of the objectives in our comprehensive plan. There is a development agreement, and that's a separate issue. Those standards apply. And there may be a new development agreement that could supersede these changes if we make these changes. But I think as a starting point, we go ahead and make these changes because it puts a marker down and says, this is what we want Kiowa to be going forward. We want to do what we can to protect our environment. And this is something we've been asked to do, and I think we should go ahead and do it.
So what would the action at this point? A motion?
Well,
on
this would
as
be,
it
and
exists?
also just to know, if we make a motion and approve this today to send it to town council, there's a first reading, there's a second reading, there's a lot of time left for adjustments to be made to this. But it gets it moving, because everything takes months to get done anyway. And as I said, we've been trying to get this moving for over a year. So if we do vote on it today and move it to town council, there's plenty of time for more public comment, more public input, and amendments, changes to be made by town council. It's not cast in concrete if we go ahead and do this today.
So, John, Mark made a comment about, a destructive event. Let's say all of windswept one of their buildings just totally was a loss. What are they allowed to come back with?
The same thing.
Same thing they have now.
Exactly what's there.
Yeah,
Not,
it's in the non-
they-
it's
they're
in
not,
the zoning
but they're not going to be
regulations.
held to any of this, even,
they
even
can
the current
rebuild.
one.
No,
Yeah, as
and-
long as they apply for a building permit to repair, restore, or rebuild the structure used for the non-conforming use is submitted within 18 months after the event and is in compliance and they pursue the permit diligently, they're good to rebuild.
And Mac, that would be true
Anywhere.
anywhere on the
Yeah,
island,
if we
correct?
get hit by a hurricane,
Yeah.
and we probably will. at
Or
some
there's a
point.
massive fire. Yeah.
But
I thought James.
Now, if they don't apply for a building permit, then it's deemed abandoned and they've got to comply with whatever the current zoning
current
is
zoning,
in place.
that's,
Okay, within 18 months.
which,
Okay.
Jean or Larry, do you have any?
And Mac, while
I'm
you're
sorry.
talking, is there, from a legal standpoint, is there an issue with conforming, non-conforming? And, I mean, are we setting ourselves up for something, a negative event, if we do create non-conforming?
I mean, the people that have, the two folks that, or two camps that have the biggest problem with non-conforming uses are, one, property owners, and then two, sort of planners from like a purist standpoint, that you generally want to have a plan to eliminate or get rid of as many you don't want to have a bunch of non-conforming
Right.
uses in a perfect planning world.
But that ship has sailed.
Yes.
We
Yes.
just might be making it take off again. But, I mean, we have a lot of non-conforming.
I think the majority of property owners don't know they have a non-conforming situation. They don't know the risk that they have.
I don't
And
know what
the
it
risk,
means.
the risk is if there's a disaster and they simply want to rebuild the home that they had before, the burden is on them to show evidence of what was built. Because the town, other than maybe, I don't know what the resources of the plan retention is,
Google
doesn't
image.
have the majority of what's been built. The town won't have evidence of that.
Google
The property
images.
owner.
Well, so when I was faced with that, though, I had to go to Charleston County and get everything Charleston County had.
I'm just saying, the responsibility is the property owner. It's,
That's true.
yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Jean or Larry, do you have any comments? You guys okay?
No, yeah, I'm generally good with where we're going with this. I like the idea that we're reducing density and setting standards for new development. I'm supportive of it.
Can we have a motion?
Joanne, can I make a comment? Joanne,
Yes, sir. Go,
can I
Larry.
make a comment?
Yeah.
First of all, I think that, for the most part, I'm okay with most of it. But I think, Mark, what struck me were some of the impacts this is going to have to the Key Island Golf, that they had a long-term plan, and they had anticipated and were executing the plan based on an expectation that they were going to be able to have, certain rights going forward. So my concern is, and they've been, in my mind, in my experience, they've been a wonderful partner to the town over these years, brought a lot of value to the town. I think many of our home values have been positively influenced by what they've done. So my only concern is by moving this forward today and then having to then consider and perhaps change, if we decide to change some of the language to acknowledge that, is resolving that first and a possibility as opposed to moving it forward today.
I think we can, if we move it forward today, as they say, there's first and second reading, so there's plenty of time to make those sort of adjustments, rather than delaying it, because that delays it again for months. But there will be opportunities. There's also going to be the opportunity, and again, none of us is privy to what's going on with the development agreement, but they can negotiate this in a new development agreement too. So there are going to be lots of opportunities to say, yes, you can add a wing to the sanctuary. But I think going forward, we make clear what the town wants, and, as I say, the town council can make changes, and there will be plenty of public comment before this is baked in as a regulation.
Okay, but yes, many people in town want this, but also, the golf entity is also a entity in the town, and I think we should consider, what their desire is too.
Yeah, no, I think nobody disagreed. They've been a great partner. We're doing this because we're at the end of the development cycle. So we can,
Okay, I'm
Let's
just
see.
wondering, is moving forward today, what's the impetus for moving forward today? Just because we've been working on it a long time?
yeah, we've been working on it a long time, and this still will give town council time to do it. And, yeah, I mean,
Sounds
I'll
like
go
a
with the,
kick the can strategy.
in the sand.
yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Joanne, to your point too, the mayor and another lawyer that works on development agreements has actively been communicating with the resort's lawyer, Trenum Walker, and they're in the process of trying to negotiate terms, et cetera.
Yeah,
on
and
that.
and we're not privy to that, so we
And I'm not
say-
either, because I'm not a development agreement
Yeah,
lawyer,
so
so
we'll
to speak.
say this is where we're at, and a new development agreement will supersede this. So I'm not real concerned that they're not going to get things they want, but I think this helps us control some of the increased density, which is what we want. But anyway,
Yeah, agreed, and as I said, I agree with most of it, I'm just concerned about the impact on the development, on the resort.
no. Well, let's see
Just
what others think. Do
one-
we have a motion?
One more comment. I do agree with Mark's comment about the commercial district. I mean, I dealt with commercial too long, and that's 50% is, I know the intent and I know what everybody's trying to do, but I don't know that that's going to get us what we want, as amenities.
I can go, I don't have knowledge on this. Do you think, is 60% okay? I mean, that I don't know. You have more experience.
I mean, for where the commercial properties are, the 70, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I've, seen up to 75%
Because I
in
know-
many jurisdictions, but,
Yeah, because I know in some of the commercial developments I've dealt with, and I'm still dealing with my other town, they insist now that you have to have big park areas, like you're building condos, so you have to have big community, open space is a big thing, I think, in
Yeah.
planning for a lot. So I think the goal here was to ensure it's not wall-to-wall concrete, that there's open space.
Yeah.
So how do you think is the best way to get at that?
well, I mean, we do have setbacks and landscape standards and those kinds of things and parking lot standards and bake in a lot of that type of stuff, green space, if you will. It's maybe,
So does
The only
lot
thing,
cover-
the only thing I would add to that, to this portion regarding the commercial zoning district is it similarly to the other two zoning districts that were in debate regarding the resort, these only apply to a handful of properties, so there aren't a vast majority of these sections, and so the existing parcels of the real estate office coming to the Kiowa Island Parkway and the general store, those two parcels, and then we also have the parcel in East Beach. And so those are generally the only commercial parcels. So if that helps you gauge what that number should be.
So if it's 70%, that includes parking lots for lot coverage?
Yes.
So 30%
that's the
of the
maximum.
lot would
That's
be-
30% of the lot would be, and that's 30% open space. That generally is what has been pretty comfortable for majority.
I wouldn't want to, I have no knowledge on this, so I wouldn't want to impose something arbitrarily. I mean, if people are comfortable keeping the 70%, town council can change it later. I can live with that. What do you think?
I can live with that. I think Rob's, I mean, are
You
we?
know more than we, so I'm happy to.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
we'll
yeah.
so we'll maintain that at 70?
I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Yeah.
I think if we maintain at 70, again, you can come back at some future point, but
Okay.
it also sounds like this is an area that we probably want to have a little bit more research done for town council's review.
All right, so we'll leave it at 70. So we'd have to make an amendment.
Correct.
Well, the question, though, this would also impact if the town were to annex property at West Angle or locations like that, right?
Yep.
Well, it would only apply if that zoning district is applied. So this,
If it was commercial zoning, okay.
if it was commercial, if it was under this, previous considerations were under plan development. So that would be separate from what's listed here.
Okay, okay.
Now, are you you and Rob comfortable
With
with?
70, that's fine.
Rob, do you want to make a motion to amend? We didn't move the ordinance.
That was
forward.
going to be my next step if you
We
want
got to move the ordinance forward first. We're actually doing this backwards. We should move it, then discuss, then vote. So can someone move it, please?
I move to approve, I'm trying to find the citation. Is it the AZ 02250000008? To a vote?
Is
To
there a
approve.
second?
I second.
Okay, now we finished discussion. So this is where you would make your amendment. Rob, would you like, since it was your thought there?
Sure, I would move to leave section 12.6A commercial district floor area ratio and lot coverage at, well, that's actually two things.
We're just doing the lot coverage.
Lot coverage would remain at 70%, but I also would,
I don't think, given we've had this, let's wait to do more research on whether we increase that or not. Let's just deal with the change.
I mean, that if you would,
Yeah.
if you desired it, that can be done as a recommendation as part of this process. So if you want to make that amendment, that can also be within planning commission's purview.
okay. So what do I do?
You would say, what
you
you
want.
said, amend 12-68,
Well,
maximum lot coverage to stay at 70%.
yes.
Is there a
Section
second?
12-6, yeah, exactly.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, okay, the amendment passes. Is there any further discussion on the actual regulation before we vote?
Mark's got,
I'm sorry. I'm like a gnat, right? Where did you end up on the FAR?
We haven't addressed that.
Okay.
We're going to leave that for town council. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion on the table to approve Resolution AZ 025-000008. All in favor? Aye. All-
Aye.
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 Larry?
I'm a nay.
All opposed?
Nay.
One nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. So this will be moved to town council. Okay. Moving on. John, you're on correspondence staff updates, Kiowa next.
Yes. Regarding QNX, our comprehensive plan update, that is scheduled for public hearing at our September town council meeting. We have pushed that out to the community for additional comments, and so we'll have public hearing in September, and that'll go through our regular amendment process through town council, public hearing, and that requires 2 readings of council as well. And so if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to me, but that'll be going through our public hearing process. Regarding development project updates, as you know, we've only had about 3 major projects underway, or 4. Seafields, MUSC continues to move at pace, so as Night Heron, activities building, and Ocean Pines. I should have an update next week on exactly where they are in the process for Ocean Pines in that development cycle. We have planning staff will be meeting with Charleston County next week to discuss Charleston County staff to discuss the urban growth boundary And so we'll have maybe some takeaways from that meeting and any next steps regarding the urban growth boundary in collaboration with the town of Kiowa, town of Seabrook, and Charleston County. I do want to just mention for next month, the things that were shared today. We do anticipate some additional discussions regarding plan developments for our September meeting, in addition to the things that were referenced today as the next steps. And then regarding our resiliency committee, Patricia, if you want to share any updates there, if yeah, I guess for the record, I'll put her on the spot just now.
Hi. The Resiliency Committee didn't meet in July, but they're going forward with subcommittees. They're going forward with the Go Green Committee and the Education Committee have been meeting, and will report back to the whole committee in August. And I will share one thing. The Go Green Committee's goal is to try to reinvigorate what was going on previously that had kind of stalled out a bit. And the Education Committee, one of the goals of the Resiliency Committee is to a strong education of the community about the resiliency efforts. And so they're looking at starting in the fall a program called Kiowa Conversations, which will include a number of panel discussions, field trips, etc. So more to come.
The other updates I'll give from Town Council's meeting regarding ordinances that went through second reading and first reading as well. So the ordinances, you recall the rezonings in Ocean Park, future land use map updates in Ocean Park, as well as the clarification regarding setbacks and administering those post 2013 ARDA. Those all receive final and second and final reading. We did have our public hearing and first reading for communication towers and the conditions of uses regarding cell towers. That received first reading approval unanimously by Town Council, and so that'll move on to second reading. I think that's all.
Any additional public comments? You're just going to have to sit up here, Mark.
Thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you for being here. We do love the resort, believe it or not. Commissioner comments. Rob?
No, I'm good.
Not today.
Mary Beth? No. Jean?
No comments.
Larry?
No, just to say that my no vote was not with against the intent of what we're trying to do, just the process.
Yep. Appreciate it, and we appreciate your perspective, too. Okay, if there are no further comments, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
All right, stay cool down there.
Thank you guys for attending. Appreciate it.